You say research. We were supposed to at some point talk about. I mean, I'm an experimenter at heart, right? And I get that from my dad. He's the guy who brought the Tatura trellis, the V-shaped trellis you see for citrus, to the United States.
He's the first one to do it, right?
First one in the United States.
Yeah,
they did it in Australia. Yeah. They've done it in Australia and Israel, I think, before here, but first in the United States. And versus other people's sumo groves, he can double production with that trellis. Without him, I think he was maybe 10 or 15 bins to an acre, which is like 40% higher than other people. But with the trellis, our best trellis block is doubling anybody besides our own best conventional block for production these days. I did an experiment in here because I can't use all this beautiful space without learning something. So I've got 4 different rows. I have this row is all planted in a berm, and your berms won't be this fancy if you ever plant them, but I had to find a way to keep my nice DG pad here differentiated because I put, this is actually weed cloth.
That's weed cloth.
Okay. Yeah. So, and you'll see, if we looked down there, you'd see wire cloth. The berm we built for the sumos over there was actually made with wire cloth. Okay. But then we were trying for cheap, we're always trying to save $1. If you're not trying to save $1, I'm not sure you're a farmer. And so what we ran into is we don't want all this dirt to come out over time, and we're going to deal with that over there with the mounds, where that dirt's going to cover our pad, and this nice expensive DG pad that's a good place to walk and move through and all that stuff is going to get covered in dirt. So we put this in just as a way to hold that in. I think it might be beneficial.
It can also add more heat to the soil.
It heats the soil up faster. Yep. So on a cold night, our berm is heating up a lot faster where we've got this. So that's good. We're seeing great growth. I mean, look, just zoom up there. All of these.
Oh, look at that. Every branch is just
every
healthy,
one of
beautiful.
These branches came out since early November.
Wow.
So this is all growth since early November up here.
Off-season growth.
Yeah, and I'll probably need to tip some of these and turn them into cuttings, because if you're talking about airflow going through here, I'm a little crowded.
Yeah, probably top that one.
Tip this guy and maybe one of these other ones over here. Anyways, we'll deal with that later. But again, if you look at my mark here, right? This is where we were in late October, early September.
Yeah.
I know what comes after October. And then it's come up. I tipped it. It took a long time to throw. Some of these, one thing maybe I should ask you about that at some point, but some of these when I tipped them, if I didn't tip them right at the top, like the ones that I cut right off at the top, they tended to throw fast. But if I tipped it, if this was up to here and I wanted to get the cutting out of it, so I cut it back, it seems to take a longer time to throw. Is that a consistent thing?
I think it is, because there's more nodes that are active at the top. And so when you cut below it, it now needs to form those nodes. I don't know. I do notice the same thing.
Because in citrus, we notice the tree develops. I don't know enough about the physiology to know where it develops it, but it definitely either develops or sends growth hormone to different parts, and you get apical dominance, and that apical dominance takes over, and that's all based in hormones.
Okay.
So if you were to take the leaves off the tip of the tree, it would have a different set of hormones than the leaves down here at the base of the tree.
That makes sense.
So I'm wondering if there's growth hormone up here, and so when you cut back down here, you're actually losing all your growth hormone.
Yeah, because it's
and putting it into the cutting,
and
that's why that cutting shoots off like crazy.
That makes a lot of sense.
So I'm curious if there's not something about the profile of this thing that's putting the growth hormone up in the tip so that it'll stretch.
But there's some people in the Philippines that are adding a hormone to a node, and they can get it to flower off season.
Oh, that's cool.
So they're using this really weird hormone. They put it right on the node, and they could get a flower bud at any time.
That's cool. So of course, we'll walk it back in because you're as distractible as I am.
Yes.
I've got the berm. I've got these pots. Now, this was my ode. I don't know how much time you spend watching all things dragon fruit on YouTube, but I was watching a couple videos by, I think his name's Gray Martin. He's got a lot of dragon fruit videos, and he was planting in pots. And so I said, why would I take your word for it? I've got to try it myself. So this pot has no bottom. All these pots have no bottom. These are actually just a shell. You're supposed to put a basket inside this, but I just used it as a bottomless pot. So I've got a 20-gallon pot. I've got two 10-gallon pots. I've got two 5-gallon pots. I've got two 1-gallon pots. I've got these, both the white and the black version of this pot, and the white is so that it doesn't absorb as much sunlight. I've got citrus pots, just like you'd use in a citrus nursery, and I just cut the bottom out of those. And all these experiments are, you know, I see a lot of people planting in pots half in the ground, so I've got a pot half in the ground down there. And I want to know, what's the actual best way? Is it planting it flat in the ground? Like all the way over there?
Or you can have your mound style here.
Well, so this mound style. So another thing about these is they're sensitive to overwatering, right? You don't want to flood them out.
This is a good strategy, I think.
Now, if you're getting, you know, if you're planting in a rainy area and you can't drain your soil, and then with citrus, wet and cold together, that's not good because the citrus drinks the water up when it's hot, but it doesn't drink anything up when it's cold. So we plant our citrus in berms, partly because when the whole ground stays wet, we can keep that berm drained. And so that's also have seen a lot of people in other countries planting in mounds like this, especially in extra rainy areas.
Yep.
So if I want to, down the line, have the capacity to put only the amount of water and fertilizer on anytime I want, part of what I need for that is the ability to drain it out when I'm not using it. So if I'm going to be maybe watering these things every single day, but a little bit less than I would water them otherwise, I'll be using less water. I'll be getting a more efficient fertilizer onto them.
Yep.
And I'm going to be keeping them with enough oxygen that the roots never go anaerobic.
And they won't be just stuck in water. They're always going to be above.
Yeah, they're always going to be
floods.
Some water, but only enough water that they can drink and not too much. So these ones are planted in the ground.
Straight in the ground.
Right in the ground.
So I made a special soil mix for this. We bought a load of clean sand, screened sand.
Okay.
And we've got this really beautiful mix of like a sort of a sandy loam and then really thick Porterville clay.
Oh, you saw some clay, huh?
So we took that Porterville clay with a little bit of loam mix just from down here where we pulled that berm out front. And we took that, so the regular dirt from around here, just our native dirt, and then we took 2 scoops of dirt to 1 scoop of dairy screenings, and dairy screenings is just denitrogenated cow scat.
Manure, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Cow manure. So they put it in a fermentation pond, and they bubble all the nitrogen out of it, and they extract that, and they sell that as fertilizer.
Okay.
And then when they're done, they have to dredge those things out, and it's just really fine, really easy to not digest, decompose organic matter. And so we add like 100 tons of that per acre.
So it's nice organic matter that's not high in nitrogen.
Yeah.
Okay.
It actually shouldn't have any nitrogen in it anymore. I mean, it's got some, but
it has trace amounts.
It's not. You wouldn't see a percentage if you bought it in a bag. You know, it wouldn't be a tested percentage. So it's just pure organic matter, no nutrients, more or less, and then 2 parts dirt. So 2 parts dirt, 1 part that organic matter, and then we did 1 part sand as well, which is a little different than what we do for citrus. But I really wanted these things to be able to drain.
Yeah, and you can see how healthy they are. Every method, I don't see a sick plant.
Yeah, and we actually, in addition to that, I believe we put in a 1/2 scoop. We had, you'll see these chunks of citrus here. We had taken out a bunch of trees recently and put them through a wood chipper. So we just put 1/2 scoop of our own native wood chips from our citrus trees in here, just to give something to break up the soil even more and give it more drainage pathways and a little more open capillaries.
And it's working well for you, huh?
It's doing good so far. I would say I don't feel bad about the stuff planted in the ground, but I don't feel as good about it if you look at the ones in the mound and in the berm.
I feel like the mound...
got some real big ones over there.
Yeah, I would agree. It feels like the mound method or the berm method seem to have good potential. Now, which one's more effort or work?
Well, so for planting an individual tree or an individual plant,
the mound would be easy.
The mound is actually a little bit harder than the berm, because you've got to build that mound up. So you basically dig a little hole. There's 2 ways. There's 2 methods that we tried. You dig a little hole and set that thing in the little hole and then just mound up around it. Or you build the mound first and then plant into the mound. But either way, you're building the mound up for each tree you plant.
Yes.
Whereas the berm, in the greenhouse, that was a lot of effort, and we had to build structure for it, and that's literally just our own neurosis. You wouldn't ever do that in a field. They have a piece for a tractor that's two blades,
right? Okay.
yeah, and then you might pull 8 berms. You get a big one of those big John Deeres with the 4 sets of tires, and or a tracked cat or something, and you pull 8 berms at a time going through the field. So if you're at a larger scale, pulling a berm is a lot less effort than building all these mounds. And then when you plant, it's super easy to plant in that berm. Well, because it's all loose and it's all highly draining soil.
So if you don't see much of a difference, it's a no-brainer to do a berm to expand your planting.
Well, and the other thing that I would work on is I'm probably going to go higher density than this in the field, provided I can get enough cuttings for my first planting. And the thing that higher density will do is, if you had mounds, it would turn into a berm anyways. You know, if I had 2 trees in between here, this would be a berm on accident. But imagine now, look at these two. Let's say I just did plant at 6 feet like I'm planted here. This is a 6 by 6 planting.
Okay.
So I did 6 by 6, but I offset by 3 feet, so that where this is coming over, that one's offset and then coming over.
This is offset here, Scott. See, so this one's right in the center of this other row here. So that's a really smart idea.
So that's basically just, I can get the same density but still have more walkway.
Yep.
Now, if you look at where the roots want to be in here, these roots want to be near the surface because this water comes down, and you can actually see the pattern of where the water went to.
Yep.
All the way around. But I've got good topsoil root zone, you know, that top 8 to 10 inches, really down to 18 inches. I've got that from here to here.
Yep.
And then anything more than that is going to be using more effort to pull all that water up. Now, if you look over at the berm, I've got all this area for top roots to go into where they can get the easy water.
Yep.
So I think in the long run, the berm is going to be way better because I can build a root zone that just comes out along this whole thing over here.
Constant 8-inch root zone or whatever.
And it's constant and it's shallow, and I can unplug this dripper here and add another octopus in and then just spread it out, right? So as soon as these grow bigger, I'll be basically using those stakes. I've got these, this is just a farming method thing, but I've got these stakes these are 1 gallon drippers. So each of these stakes are roughly a quarter of a gallon. And then I can move them into different locations. So say now this is officially rooted better, I might want to build out my root ball down to here more. Mm-hmm. So I can move those around and actually affect how the tree or the plant grows. Sorry, I'm a citrus farmer. I'm going to say tree until the day I die. It's just the way it's going to go. Plant, and the plant material, but it gives me the flexibility to punch in another dripper and then just put more things and keep that root base going out the direction it's going.
As your plant gets 300 pounds.
Well, and I don't necessarily need a wide root base when I've got a single stalk growing up, but it'd be nice to add it later. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of strategy stuff that comes into this, and just lessons learned from how much we've messed up on citrus.